First of all, if we want, as we said, if we want to secure the future of the Jewish people, and again, to me, of the free world, Israel has to win. But you know what? It's not only for us, it's for them. Why are the people of Gaza suffering? Because of Hamas. And I'm not talking about the suffering they have now because of the war, because Tzahal is inside. I'm talking about what happened in Gaza for 15 years. Since Hamas took over, actually, even from before, since Arafat became in power. Sorry. Okay? They were living, we support democracies. They were living under a brutal extreme Islam regime in Gaza. If you care about democracy values, you should be the first to support Israel to eliminate Hamas. Otherwise, it means that you support extreme Muslim dictatorships.
Hello, and welcome to the Z3 podcast. I'm Amitai Fraiman, the director of the Z3 project. And in this episode, I had a conversation with Ariel Kahana. He's a senior correspondent covering diplomatic affairs, and he is also an analyst on Channel 14 in Israel. In this conversation, we heard a lot about the October 7th war, the mood in Israel, how people perceive the necessity of the war, how discourse has changed, and of course, the interconnectedness between Israeli Jews and diaspora Jews, and how we are all impacted by this moment, whether we like it or not, agree or disagree with what is going on, and the importance of remembering that as we navigate through this difficult moment. It's an incredible conversation, I think, and very insightful, and gives an honest and very a truthful kind of representation of what's going on in the many folks on the street. Of course, it's a specific experience, and yet I find it very enriching and meaningful for anybody who wants to hear about Israel and Israeli psyche in this moment beyond just what is reported on the major news outlets. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Ariel Kahana. I know I did. Please follow us on our various channels and platforms, and I hope you enjoyed this episode podcast with Ariel Kahana. Take a listen. Welcome, Ariel Kahana. It's a great pleasure to have you here on the Z3 podcast. We met in 2018 in the conference all those years ago, before I even started here in this position. But I'm excited that we're able to reconnect. I've been following, of course, your work, and in a minute you'll introduce yourself. But just to remind our listeners, in the Z3 Project podcast, what we do is we expand the conversations we try to have at our conference to this platform and this medium as well. And so we host a variety of thinkers, journalists, rabbis, activists, and have the opportunity to have a conversation about their area of expertise and what they're thinking about in this moment. And so it's a great pleasure to have Ariel join us today. And I'm excited to get started. So maybe, before we do, maybe Ariel, just like a sentence or two about your background and your what you're doing these days.
Okay, so Shalom Amitai, and Toda Rabba, thanks a lot for having me. I must say in the beginning that to me, it's very important, for my soul, I would say, to be in touch with other Jews all around the world. That's the reason I'm sitting here quite late in the evening here in Israel.
Yeah.
But it is important for me. That's the reason why I came to, what was it, San Francisco, right?
In Palo Alto,
6 years ago.
Yeah. 6 years ago.
Palo Alto, yes.
Yeah.
And so on. And actually it was important for me, of course, before the war, but now after what happened or what is happening since October 7, I think those in our people, the Jewish people who didn't understand before how much we are one, whether we want it or no, I believe now most of us understand it much better, and unfortunately in a very sad circumstances, but that's the way it is. So to me, just talking with you and the people who will hopefully listen to us and see us, just another small step to try to be in touch. So I thank you for the opportunity for that.
Yeah, of course.
So okay, great. So you want to ask who I am, if I get you right?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, just give us a little bit insight for those who are not familiar and don't follow your writing and your coverage online.
Thank you for that. Yeah. It's a very it's a philosophical question. Who am I and what I'm doing here?
Yeah.
and I'm asking this question, I mean, every morning and every night. But since we are here, and since Kadosh Baruch Hu, God gave me some positions, so then I try to do the best I can with it. So I'm 50 years old. I live in Geva Binyamin, which is, you can say, suburbs of Yerushalayim, a settlement, to be, the formal definition. But it is very close to Yerushalayim. I'm married to Limor. We're married for 24 years, it's going to be now. We have 7 children, Baruch Hashem. One of them was a soldier. One of them will become a soldier very soon. And so on. And my work is being a journalist, which, by the way, is happened by coincidence. It's another issue which, every morning I find myself still a journalist, so I keep writing, keep talking, and etc. But of course, it could change every day. Who knows? And today I'm working my main job is with Israel Hayom newspaper. We have an English edition as well, go and read, and it's online. Nice. But Israel Hayom, first of all, is the most distributed newspaper in Israel. I'm covering diplomatic issues, which actually means Israel ties with the world and with the Jewish communities as well, because I can tell you, I've been in dozens of states all around the world. Most of them were joining or covering trips of Israeli leaders. Most of them was with Netanyahu, because it's the last 15 years. So I've been with him, but with Bennett and Lapid as well, when they were in office or in other events all around the world. And every state, every country you go, you see the Jewish community has a unique role regarding the ties between that country and Israel. So to me, diplomatic issues and Israel and other states is always connected to the Jewish communities in every state all around the globe. So actually, that's how I got involved in those issues of peoplehood, Jewish peoplehood. And on top of that, on top of writing, I'm talking with you now from Channel 14, the Israeli TV, which is very popular here. I'm here almost every evening. So a panel member, which is very nice for me. It's the first time to do TV in 30 years, so almost 30 years of journalism. So it's a very nice experience, very popular, as I said. And, and I'm dealing a lot with politics, with actually, you can say, every important issue that we have here in Israel. And we had a lot of them before October 7. We have, unfortunately, much more since the war began. And yes, I would say that those days, the current days, since the war began, actually the last 5 months is right. Why? I think it's all about the war. It's all about the war. I'm trying, while talking with you, I'm trying to remember if I was covering any issue which is not related to the war. Did I had any other story? And I think that if I'm not wrong, the answer is no, because everything is related to the war. Most of it directly, some of it non-directly, but the war is all around us and everywhere. And although it's not. The military effort now in Gaza is not as strong as it used to be in the beginning. It's still again, it's the main topic, and everything is related to that. I don't know for how long, but that's definitely the main focus. And I know as well that it is relevant to you guys, the other side of the world, because I am trying at least to follow what's going on in Jewish communities, and it doesn't look pleasant from here, I would say.
Yeah, certainly there's a lot going on, but I want to pick up on a few things, and we'll get to what's happening here and the connection between the two. But I think that a good first step is for our audiences who might not be as well versed in what's going on in Israel, not in terms of the facts of the war, right? Like people can follow, there's a lot of coverage wherever you look. But what I think people are not so intimately familiar with is, I'd say, the emotional and psychological state of Israel. Growing up in Israel, war was a fixed, was a piece of just growing up. It was either more intense or less intense. And certainly, I think in recent memory, this is unique in its length and its intensity, both what started it and also the response. And I think that is something that most folks aren't familiar with, is like, what is it doing to Israeli society from that perspective, right? Like, what is the emotional, the psychological environment that Israelis are experiencing?
So I'll try to answer, and of course, it's my perspective. It's not objective. I mean, in ways that everyone is reacting in a different way. Just yesterday, a colleague of mine, a friend of many years, she tells me that she's afraid, and I'm talking with you about people who are living in the center of Israel. Because of what happened in October 7th, some people are really still afraid, and they understand, logically, that no terrorist is going to come to their home. But after what happened, some of the people are afraid, and they cannot control this fear. So that is one feeling, I would say. It's so you have it all from all kinds. You have, first of all, and first of all, I think the vast majorities, 90%, even more, of Israelis understand that this war is for our survival. If we will not win it, it's gonna be very problematic. And therefore, you saw so many heroes just jumping inside the fire on the first hours without no one calling them. And after that, you saw all the I don't know how to say it in English, all the espedim of the
eulogies. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Of the mothers and of the widows, which gave so much power to so many people with so much inspiration. And you see parents, and I know some of them. I mean, it's friends of mine, who lost their sons in the war, and they still, and of course, their pain, they suffer, but at the same time.
Yeah, wait, hold on. There was a whole lag there. It froze for a second. So you said in the same time there's a lot of pain. Yeah, we'll clean it up, because there was the eulogies of mothers and parents and wives and widows and some of them that and they get a sense of inspiration and pain, and at the same time they must continue. Yeah,
and not only continue, we must win. We must do all the way to the end to have, like Bibi is saying, a complete victory, not 90%, not 95%, and not 85%. It has to be 100% victory, which maybe later, if you want, we can go to what does it mean. But if it's a consensus that if we will not be sure that we won this war, the future implications might be very negative. But you get this message. I mean, even from people who lost or paid the highest price that a man can pay in our lives. So what I want to say by that is that you have all kinds of feelings. Of course, some people afraid, as I said. Some people are even talking about leaving the country. I'm very, very sincere with you. You have about, I think today it's about 150,000 people who are evacuated, still 5 months living out of their homes in hotels or other places, or like they say, it's a jail. It's not an hotel, it's a jail, because hotel is a nice place for 1, 2, 3 days, not for 5 months, not with kids. Not that you are living in a very tiny home with your children, and you don't cook for your children, you don't give them the food they like. You are told that you can eat just between 6 to 9, and if you want to have some snack, I don't know, at 12, there is no place to go because the food room in the hotel is locked at this moment. And I'm talking about kids who like this food and like that food and so on. And of course, all of them were cut out from the communities, from the schools, from the teachers. And it goes to, to my children that for the first weeks of the war didn't learn in schools. They were at home. The principal of my smallest daughter, he's in the war since the first day and didn't come back. I mean, he's alive, he's still fighting, but he just he didn't come back to the school. He came one day to visit. So you have it all over you, and you have it in as I said, in all kinds of feeling of power, of inspiration, of fear, of everything. And if you want to ask about the long run implications, the long run conclusions, the long run insights, to me, it's too early to call. I mean, we can talk about, some thoughts I have.
Yeah.
But we really cannot know where it will go to because we are still in the middle, maybe even just in the beginning of it. Let's just say that there will be another war, much more serious with Hezbollah. So all what we saw in those last 5 months is just the beginning of what might be much, much worse. But that's where we are. And although the difficulties, and there are many difficulties, I think people here are determined that we have no other choice, as I said, than winning, because it's not only for us. I mean, not only for the Jews here, it's for the entire Jewish people all around the world. It's for the Jewish history. It's for, to me at least, it's for the most basic values of being a free man in our world. To me, it's very clear. This war is not only about us here, the Jews in Israel. It's about the entire free world. But that's, I don't know, politics and international politics and so on. But again, because you asked me what does it mean? So yeah. That's war. That is what the war is meaning, at least for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's very the intensity of the emotions it comes across very clearly, and I think that for those of us who are intimately either there or have for me, yes, I am farther away, but still very much immersed in it through friends and family. I think that is clear, and what I have trouble, and I'm trouble in translating for some people here is you and I might say we don't have a choice. Right? Like this is an existential war. We understand the implications kind of intrinsically. We understand that if the war isn't won decisively, and I know that there's conversations about what that exactly means. We understand. We understand what that means. But what I'm also seeing here, and I'm hoping maybe you can help. Maybe we can articulate it together. Is like how do we tell that story, right? Because there are folks here saying, yes, and is there a limit, right? Like the war can't really be decidedly you can't win it decisively. There's huge, human suffering on the other side, right? And how are we okay with that? Now I have my answers, right? But I'm curious to hear how, because if it's unanimous in Israel, right? You and I were one people, but if it crosses, political. The political spectrum in Israel, how does that discourse come about? Like, how do people talk about it in that way? Folks who won't typically find themselves on the more, hawkish side of things, or more on the dovish. How do they justify this necessity of war in this moment?
So I'm as I told you before, I'm for 15 years now. I'm covering diplomatic issues, right. And that includes briefings and discussions with many foreign diplomats. I can tell you that just yesterday we had a meeting with, let's call it a Western diplomat, because I'm not allowed to say from which country he was, but it's a very non-significant Western country and not the US, okay? But until October 7th, as you said, I was always on the hawkish side, usually the only one, maybe sometimes one would join me, because most of the media here, as you know, is let's say center left. And what is happening since October 7 is that I'm not the most hawkish guy in the room, not anymore. And I'm talking with you about people from, again, the center left, who didn't share my views on the right side of the political map all those years. The way they are talking now is the language. Sometimes it's even stronger than mine. And the way Israeli Jews understand what happened and understand the threat is, as you said, as existential. And now I can prove it to you logically. You can say, you know, I'll tell you a story. I want to tell you a short story. Many years ago, I visited in the Jewish community of Switzerland, of Zurich, like we say in Hebrew, right? Now, the Jewish community in Zurich was not suffering during the Holocaust because the Nazis didn't get inside Switzerland. And of course, Switzerland cooperated with the Nazis, but the Jewish community was not harmed at all in the Holocaust. And so I was there with my father and my brother, and we had some discussions. And the message it's a Haredi community over there, and the message they told us is kind of, we don't share your Zionist values because we are here for 1,000 years, we are safe, everything is all right, and we're going to be here for another 1,000 years, and nothing's going to happen because here in Switzerland, it's okay for the Jews. And you know what happened in the last weekend? A Jewish member of the Haredi community in Zurich was attacked. Not for the first time, by the way, but in this case, it's a very painful attack. He was hit quite strongly. So, and now you guys in America, I know I see from here what you're going through. I can't say I know because I'm not there, I'm here. But it seems to me, and we see it, that there are many threats for Jews over there in America, because they are not because of Israel, because they are Jews. So at least to me, it tells that there is no question why this is an existential war, not only for Israel and not only for Israeli Jews, but for the entire Jewish people, and again for the entire free world, in my view. But we saw, and we still see, in the most negative ways there is, how much we are connected with each other. If before the war we had this illusion that we can have, how do you say it, a blind eye with what's going on with our brothers and sisters on the other side of the world, and it doesn't matter if I am as an Israeli Jew had this illusion that I can ignore Jews in the other side of the world, or the Jews in America has these illusions they can ignore me. Now, again, in the most negative and painful way, it's clear we cannot have this blind eye. We must watch each other. We must watch the back one of each other, trying to help and secure and so on. And by the way, just when I'm talking with you now, a friend living in New Jersey, who's bringing equipment from the beginning of the war, he's trying to call me because tell me some updates I don't know about. He's bringing helmets and has many other stuff to the soldiers. So you see, and I know the amounts of the money were unbelievable that came here, still coming, and I know the support came from American Jews and actually Jews all around the world to hear is very known. You know, for years, and since Amitai, you're into stuff, so you know, for years, Jewish diaspora in my media stuff, it was not an item. It was kind of, everybody understood it is important to keep good ties with Jews in the other world, but in the other side of the world, but it was never an item in the news. It was never strong enough item, strong enough story to tell about. Not anymore. Today, the donations, the help, and by the way, and the suffering of Jews on the other side, in other places in the world, it is a story here. Because now, in 1 second, in one horrible second, everybody understand again that we have just one another. We are tiny people connected all around the world, and although the differences, I mean, again, in the most painful way, we all understand now how the differences between us are not important. Are not important. I won't say it all, but it's definitely not the first. Shouldn't be the first priorities. The first topics that we have to discuss. The first issues we have to discuss and we have to deal with is how to secure the future of the Jewish people in Israel, all around the world, and etc. And again, we paid a very high price to get this lesson. But I guess, and as far as I know, you can tell me, now the eyes of most of the people are open. That's at least what I get from being here in Israel.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point, because I think that there's we'll first talk about this idea of the eyes open here, but I have a question about the sense of cohesion in Israel, and we'll get there in a minute. There are several surveys, and we're seeing different kinds of trends here in the American Jewish community. And while there has been a pretty significant rise in how people think about their relationship to Israel and Judaism post-October 7th, everybody feels more connected, certainly. There is still a very noticeable gap generationally, right? So I think folks who are like over 40, I don't remember the exact, I'm thinking about a specific survey that I saw. I think it's like over 40-ish, it's like at the high 70s, 80s. People are feeling, in like an increase. And then younger, it did rise significantly, but it's in the, I'd say 40s. 40% feel strong connection to Israel. So I think there is a concern here. There's an angst in the Jewish community about this generational, and I know like part of that's like a Jewish neurosis, right? Like, is the next generation going to be as, observant as we are and as connected as we are? Is throughout Jewish history. It's not unique to this moment. And also, we are seeing a lot of people who identify very strongly as Jews, right? These are not people who are saying, I'm not part of but through a Jewish lens, say, what Israel's doing, not in my name, not, this is endangering us, this isn't. So while there's an improvement, there's still a sizable amount of people who are kind of feeling that piece. And so we kind of see, but we see both of that. We see both of those things. We're seeing a lot of it. And I'm curious, A, is that come across in Israel at all? Is that like something that's talked about? And B, maybe your thoughts on that data point.
So first of all, to me, I mean, I get it, and I'm okay with critics about Israel, including from Jews. Of course, I would like everyone to understand us and support us and so on. But what is important for me is that even people who disagree with me or disagree with Israel moves, Israel steps, and so on, first of all, we understand that we are one. Whether we agree or disagree, we are one. That's, to me, should be the beginning. And we are connected, and whether we like it or not, I mean, we can see ourselves, some of us can see ourselves as not responsible and divided one from each other. Our enemies don't see it this way. That's for sure, okay? And again, the rallies you have in America, the hate rallies you have in America, the attacks you get in America is unfortunately a very sad message that even if you want to run away, you can't do it, okay? Now, Israel is here. Israel is doing what it understands it has to do. Maybe we are right, maybe we are wrong. Of course, I'm living here and I have my opinions about the government and about what the army do, and we are Jews, so we have at least 2, 3, 4 opinions, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so naturally, it's not that I agree with everything, but that's my one and only Jewish state. I have no other, and I have no doubt that the Jewish people has no other future than this miracle, which is the state of Israel, and this miracle is now under a risk. Okay, I'll tell you, I had a conversation with a friend. She is a lady in the media staff. She was living in one of the kibbutzim near the border in Gaza. Ran away on the first day. She's still in Tel Aviv in a hotel with 4 boys. Just imagine what it is to be in 5 months with 4 boys in a tiny room in a very good hotel. But okay, but still, it is what it is. And she told me, you know what, Ariel, I have no ideology. I don't care. If I could, I would go to a different country. So I told her, let's call her Danielle. I told her, Danielle, what do you think will happen? Let's go, you're going to the UK. What do you think will happen? You will have two choices. The first one is to be who you really are, which is a Jewish Israeli woman. The other option will be to hide your identity, to change your name, to change your kid's name, to delete their Hebrew, to delete their accent, to cut them from their grandparents. That's the options you have. That's it. It means you can't run away. And I had in my family, my parents, I didn't tell you, my parents are both Holocaust survivors, were kids. And my mother was a baby, my father was a boy in the Holocaust. They're still alive, Baruch Hashem. Both in their 80s, of course. And my mother had an aunt that in the 30s escaped from Germany to the US, to America. And about 30 years, since the 30s until the 60s, they escaped Judaism and said, we saw what happened. We don't want any more ties with the Jewish people. So they kept going with it for, as I said, 3 decades. And then, unfortunately, she got cancer. And when she got cancer, she came back to the family. They came to visit Israel. And actually, they came back. Because, again, we can't run away. And I guess you know that, and I guess our listeners and people who watch us, we know that, that's I don't know how you say it in English, the Anusim, the people who were living in Spain.
The conversos, and in the Inquisition.
Okay, so how many of them keeping some customs and want to come back to the Jewish people? Hundreds of years later. Not everyone, of course. There's no question. Some people left the Jewish people forever. If it wasn't so, we were like the Chinese 1 billion people today, right? No question. You can run away, but for most of us, I would say, it won't hold on, because you just like to run away from who you are, and all in all, you don't want to do it. And by the way, you can run away. I guess your kids or your grandkids will look for the roots, and at least some of them will come back. But in any case, going back to our current reality, the Jewish people in these days is in very troubling days. To me, it is a beginning of a very problematic era. Whatever going to happen here, whatever going to happen in America, we now see the threats in our own eyes. We see it not only here in Israel, we see it again all over the free world. I can tell you that I'm going to be in 2 weeks in London for covering what's going on there. The difficulties over there are very serious. Again, over there in London, in the UK, the attacks on almost on daily basis. I'll tell you, preparing this visit, a mother told me today that her 11 years old son, going in the train every day to school, 11 years old child, they're shouting to him that free Palestine. Probably he have a kippah, so I don't know. So they recognize him as Jewish. So it's again, it's an entire Jewish people problem. We have to face it, and I mean, I believe we have no other choice than to fight it, because otherwise the other side will have a victory, and it's going to be very, very painful if they will win. Much more pain that we already had.
Yeah. So I mean, it's very sobering. It's not a very, I mean, the optimism of like we will get through it. We don't have another choice, I think, is an ethos that Israel and Israelis have. Like, there's no, the idea of Eni Eretz Acheret, we don't have another land, is something that kind of drives a lot of people's sense of mission and kind of decision-making process. And I'm curious to ask a little bit about the you mentioned how there's consensus around the necessity of the war. I know there's a variety of ideas of like what that actually looks like. Is it enough? Is it not enough? Is it too much? But all in all, there's a consensus. But up until October 6th, the country was split, and there were very, very deep divisions. And the sense that I'm getting, and you're there, so you can and you're in the media apparatus, so you see it firsthand. Are we returning to those divisions now a little bit? Are we still kind of as united as people are saying we are, or are we starting to see a little fraying in the sense of togetherness in this moment?
It's a very good question. I think it's confusing in a way, and by the way, it's in heretic. How do you say inherent, right? Inherent problem you have always the gap between the media and where people are.
Right.
You had it always, because the media, has its own role, its own wave, its own way, its own circle. That's what I'm looking for. The media has its own circle, and the people are, let's say, most of the media is left, but here most of the people are voting for the right. So just one example. So if you follow the media, you get or Twitter, right? You get the impression that once again we are divided, and you have demonstrations and stopping the blocks, the Ayalon Road, etc., etc. It's not what's going on the ground. By the way, from both sides. I mean, the right side, those who supported the reform, not even put it on the table. I mean, it's not even beginning to begin. And from the other side, again, it's clear to everyone, almost everyone. Again, you do have some few thousands of people who are trying to go back to where we are, but they do not have the massive support they had last year. And I'm very happy for that, because we have no luxury now to go to internal fights, not at all. I can tell you again, I'm coming from the right side, but I'm supportive of this unity government that you can't imagine. We have to go together. We have to go together. And I believe 70, even 80% of the people here share the same position. So, the media have to show, and I'm a media person, but we have to show conflict. We have to say, because, if everyone will sit, we agree one with each other. So we have to show a show. We have to show a conflict. We have to show disagreements. We have to show arguments. But practically, grassroots, on the ground, people just want to go. Understand we have to go together. Want to go together. Now, of course, you will see on the social networks. You will see disagreements. You will see some negative stuff. That is part of our life in this era. But when it comes to reality, and sorry, I forgot the politicians. Unfortunately, the politicians are going back to do what some of them are going back to do what they used to do, which is the nasty politics, unfortunately. But if you go to the public, I didn't see a poll in last days, but I'm always trying to feeling the pulse, and I have friends from both sides, of course. Again, it's clear we have to go together from all the reasons we discussed before.
Yeah. So I mean that's hopeful, and of course there's a lot of similarities to what's happening here in the U.S. with the internal, with the elections and everything, and the role of media. I mean, media, yes, needs to show conflict, certainly, and social media is just that on steroids because the turnover and the news cycle is much faster. So it's just and the algorithm. There's lots to talk about that. You and I don't have to go into that, but certainly there's a level of, it seems. But and at the same time, I mean, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like maybe two things that come to mind that I know that are front and center. The first.
Repeat, please, Amitai. I lost you for a second.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I said certainly social media and media does that whole polarization.
Yeah.
And there's overlap here. We're seeing that it's a problem. It's a societal problem. Of kind of pushing people apart. And I'm comforted to hear that in Israel, on the street level, on the grassroots level, yes, there's the politicians, yes, there's media, but that still isn't there. And at the same time, there's two instances I'm curious to hear your thoughts about. One is like more in the geopolitical realm, and as it comes to the U.S., which is Gantz's recent visit, and the whole, Bibi was mad, Bibi wasn't mad, he should have gone. And
that's kind of the ugly stuff I was referring to.
Right, and it's my assumption that a lot of that stuff is performative, right? In other words, like when I think that maybe I'm giving too much credit here, but I imagine that Bibi understands why Gantz needs to go, but he could never admit it publicly, right? Because of his base and because of his voters. That maybe I'm being too charitable, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts. But I want to hear about his trip. And the other thing is this whole thing with the ultra-Orthodox and the need for them to, this whole chok gius, the law, trying, this age-old thing of how do we get more ultra-Orthodox folks to participate in society in general, and specifically in the military. I think is a piece that folks are feeling angry about, particularly as the death toll is going up for Israeli soldiers. People are being called, gap years are being shortened. People are being called in from yeshivot, from the religious public, whatever is shortened, and the Haredim are kind of untouched. So I'm curious about those two things. I know they're separate, but just maybe as a barometer of like the internal cohesion, what does that look like?
So you just asked 2 or 3 very tiny, easy questions, and you want me to solve it in 5 minutes. Okay,
just an observation. Let's start with Gantz, about the trip, and Kamala Harris and what she said.
So I hope it's okay. Now you will say I'm politicians that are not answering the questions. I want to touch the issue you mentioned before. I mean, I want to a little bit explore it about the social networks and the media and that and so on. So because to me it's kind of the basics that all the other stuff come after them. Look, I'm a media person, of course. I don't have to say I'm for free speech. I'm for democracy. I mean, I have a theory I can show you that when I give some talks and then briefings and so on, I always show. I didn't plan to do it, but I will show you. I visited China a few years ago, actually twice. And since I'm a journalist, every time I came to the hotel, this nice paper, I hope you can see it, was waiting on my table. And what it says, it's a list. I mean, it says here that the internet is open in China. You just can't follow Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Google, New York Times, and Bloomberg. Okay, that's more or less the message. So I'm for free speech, and it's a basic value in our society. But I think we could solve this problem even before the war, but we understand now how it affects us even more. There is a crisis in our democracies. It's all over the globe. I mean, maybe in Australia it's okay, but you had in the last years crisis, very serious political crisis in America, in Israel, in the UK, in Italy, in Germany, now in Holland, and in many other, in Belgium, I think in Spain as well. And to me, there is a very clear link between the social networks and this fundamental crisis of Western free democracies. So it's not that I have an answer how exactly to solve, but at least we have to be aware to the problem, because we understand that our democracies, they're not working the way we wanted to work, because it's weakening us. We are not dealing. Some of the problems we have, our leaderships are not handling those problems the way they should, because of social networks. And we are not choosing the best leaders we have because of social networks, because of conspiracies, because of fake news. And we are paying very high prices for that. And I'm not taking here political side. It's not that the problem of fake news is in the right wing and the left is okay. Not in here, not in other places. It's a fundamental problem we have in our democracies, in our era. And in my eyes, it is weakening our democracies. It is weakening the free world. And all the negative forces in the world, which is China, the non-democratic one, China, Iran, Russia, or North Korea is not an international threat, but at least those three countries are using our weakness for challenging us. To me, it is beginning there. Now, the end of it, or maybe not the end, but then you have the particular problems you mentioned between Israel and America, between Bibi and Gantz, and so on. Again, to me at least, I had a feeling, at least I have to show you this fundamental problem. Now, let's talk a little bit about Gantz and Netanyahu. Okay, we had this visit while you and me are talking now. Gantz is supposed to land here back in Israel every second. The visit is over. Look, politics is politics. They are both politicians. They're both Israeli patriots. They're both they have a very problematic history and distrust one with each other. I don't want to go now to who was wrong. To me, it was positive that Gantz is. To me, Gantz was trying to explain his positions and Israel's position. And by the way, when it goes to substance, the differences between Bibi and Gantz are very small regarding the war. Very small. Both support going to Rafah and complete the war over there. Both do not support a Palestinian state now, etc., etc. So, and they have the same position regarding hostage deal or pause or ceasefire, the way you call it. So when you go to substance, it shows you how is it connected. Because if you go to substance, again, the differences between the both are tiny. But if you go to the social media, so Gantz is to the supportive of the right side, Gantz is an enemy of the people. And if you go to the left side, Bibi is enemy of the people. So it shows you how ridiculous all that is and how it is weakening us from the inside. Because maybe a negative wave from social media might push Gantz out of the government. And we need a unity government now. You understand? So those inherent problems are affecting us. So in any case, Gantz is coming back. as far as I understand, he has no plans to leave the government. He understands that, again, we have to win. And for winning, we need a unity government. And he plans to stay inside the government, as far as I understand, until it will be clear that the war has ended, hopefully with a victory. And it's going, again, I guess it's going to take at least months. And just after that, he will probably leave the government, and maybe we'll have elections, maybe not. I don't know. But that's about him and Bibi. I'm much more worried with the United States position with Israel. First of all, what Biden has done is very appreciated here by most people. Now the administration is changing the policy, so maybe we'll touch it in a second. But I want to share with you, if we have some time for that, I want to share with you a very small story. You know, I since, as I told you, I'm covering. I joined a lot of trips with Netanyahu around the world, and actually the last trip before the war was with Netanyahu's United Nations in New York, and then he had a meeting with President Biden. And when Biden saw him, he said a sentence that's still stuck in my mind. Before the war, he said, I'm translating it to Hebrew, back from Hebrew to English. He said, if there is no Israel, no Jew around the world is safe. It goes back to the issues we discussed before. Biden said that, not me, not a Jewish leader. Again, the president of the United States, a democratic president of the United States, said, no Jew in the world is safe if there is the state of Israel. He said that 3 weeks before the war, maybe even 2 weeks before the war. And I was very surprised to hear it. I had a feeling it's a very significant message by the president, and I wrote a story about it to explore, to explain to my readers why did he say that, what is his background, and so on. So I'm telling you all that to tell you that when he made the famous speeches in the beginning of the war, the dawn speech, right? Speeches actually, I was not surprised, because I understood that his heart is in our side, in the Jewish side, in the Jewish people's side, in Israel's side. When he saw the atrocities that Hamas did that morning, it was the morning in Israel, he immediately understood what's going on. Maybe before some of us here even understood. So, because he understands the meaning of the state of Israel. What does it mean to have one and only Jewish state after 2,000 years? He understands it. And therefore, he's supportive to this moment, with sending the ammunition, with securing Israel in the United Nations. And people here are appreciated a lot. We do have a problem in the last weeks. I would say in the last weeks, it becomes even bigger with all the stuff of the humanitarian aid. Now, I don't know if we have the time, and I don't know if you want to go into it, but what is shown in the media and in social networks regarding the situation in Gaza is not the reality. Now, I don't know if you know, for example, for years we were told that the people in Gaza are suffering before the war, that they live in poverty, that they have to get help from the world, etc., etc. Now our soldiers are inside. You know what they see? Not everyone, of course, but they see a very fancy neighborhoods in many places, not all. A lot of rich people, a lot of money, a lot of good life. Okay, so the lies were here before the war, and they still are. I know the IDF is checking the humanitarian situation in Gaza every day. I can tell you that plenty of supply is getting in. The problems are not because of us. The problems are because that once the trucks are going inside Gaza, there is no, I mean, unless Hamas, there is no one to distribute them inside. Okay? So I guess there is some suffering in Gaza. I am sure no one is starving to death. If, God forbid, that would happen, we would see the pictures. Okay? I didn't see any picture of someone, chas v'chalila, God forbid, starving to death. I'm sure it's not happening. And we will not let that happen because we are Jews. So it will not, as long as Israel has been in the situation, no one will die from starvation in Gaza, as long as it depends in our soldiers' hands, okay? So we have a lot of fake news running all around. And I know, I mean, now, what Gantz did in America is trying to explain all that to Kamala Harris and others. And the narrative, the story, I mean, the gaps between what's really going on the ground and what is being told, and I'm following CNN and other networks, it's like you know, it's like Shamayim va'aretz. It's like what's going on the earth and what is being told on the sky. You can't connect those two stories because it's really it's two different poles.
Yeah, I mean, the only stories that we see here, I mean, like are of intense human suffering in Gaza, right? Intense human suffering in Gaza. Now, I don't know how to bridge that gap. In other words, for me, it's, from my experience, is this is war. Welcome to reality. It's sad. It's tragic. It's painful. Everybody's paying a terrible price, but that's war. It's not Disney. We grew up on fairy tales and happily ever after, and everything's gonna work out. And this is war. This is what war looks like. And people are like, and people will, and there is a ton of the numbers of casualties and children displaced, and millions of people needing to move, etc. So I'm like, yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, and this is war. This is war. Like, it feels terrible. I feel, but there is no, if the price that we need to pay, if the Jewish people can't pay that price of allowing October 7 and subsequent October 7th in order to limit other people's suffering. It's that morality doesn't stand that test. No one will sacrifice themselves for other people's security. It doesn't work that way. It's a mythology that doesn't hold the test of time or anything. And so I don't know how to tell that story. I don't know how to tell people, because once you get into the question of the equation of suffering, right? Then people just it's never ending, right? We have 150,000 people displaced in Israel, but they're in hotels. They have 1.5 million people displaced in Gaza, not in hotels, right? And I'm like, this is war. It's besides the point, right? You're not focusing on the implications, the root causes, and the long-term price that the Middle East will have to pay if we focus just on that narrative. And I don't know how to square that. I don't know how to live with that narrative. And that's what people here are dealing with.
Okay, so first of all, of course, there's suffering. By the way, I was in Gaza once, and I saw a family. Actually, it was a family without the father. It were a few mothers and a few children going with their bags from the north of the strip to the south. And as you said, you feel sorry for them, you feel mercy for them, and I wish they wouldn't suffer. And I agree, it's definitely the prices of the war. But what I'm saying is that I am sure no one is starving to death in Gaza. I'm sure it's not happening. I'm sure if that would happen, we would see the pictures. And what is 1,000% sure is that Israel is doing all what it can to avoid such a situation of someone starving to death. That's what I want to say. Now, the question is not at all comparing the suffering. The question is securing the future. Because, let's say that now they are suffering more than us. I mean, I don't know, how can you compare a group rape of women, okay? Can you compare that with the family that is hungry?
Who is more suffering? But that's exactly the point. The discourse is about that. And I what I'm trying to say is human suffering is terrible, but the world doesn't operate in that. That's a realm that's a line of discourse that isn't helpful and isn't really solution oriented. It doesn't move us towards it doesn't move us forward, because we get stuck in a narrative of who's a bigger victim and who's more in pain. And that, to me, is not that's not a Jewish frame of seeing the world. And that's my lens, which is why I don't like going there, right? But when it's raised, but that is the discourse in CNN and some of the other places where they're like, yeah, but look, 30,000 killed in Gaza. You have 200, like, how do we talk about that?
In my opinion, we talk about that because if we want, first of all, as we said, if we want to secure the future of the Jewish people, and again, to me, of the free world, Israel has to win. But you know what? It's not only for us, it's for them. Why are the people of Gaza suffering? Because of Hamas. And I'm not talking about the suffering they have now because of the war, because Tzahal is inside. I'm talking about what happened in Gaza for 15 years. Since Hamas took over, actually, even from before, since Arafat became in power. Sorry. Okay? They were living, I mean, we support democracies. They were living under a brutal, extreme Islam regime in Gaza. Yeah. If you care about democracy values, you should be the first to support Israel to eliminate Hamas. Otherwise, it means that you support extreme Muslim dictatorships. What was Hamas? Did they have elections? I mean, they once, that's what happens. They once won the elections, and since then they control by power. Right. So if you want to secure and you want to give future to, again, not only to Israel, but to the people of Gaza, you have to help Israel to eliminate this brutal extreme dictatorship regime in Gaza.
So I think this is a great. I actually think this is incredibly helpful and illuminating. And I'm saying this because because these are the voices in which this is the world in which we operate, in which we live, right? But like, I am almost, no, I can say this, there's no qualification here. I am not interested in engaging with people who are pro-Hamas, right? That is not interesting to me. They're genocidal extremists. Like there's no qualifying aspect of that around Hamas. But there are members of our community who are saying, okay, I agree, and to what extent, right? We keep on saying Israel needs to win, Israel needs to win. What does that look like, right? And I mean, again, I don't have answers. It's not like I'm presenting a specific like this. I certainly don't have an answer, right? But I'm curious, maybe like, what does Israel winning look like, and what does Israel winning look like right now in
to make it okay? I'll tell you my answer and to make it as short as possible. Just as the Allies won Germany in 1945, what should happen in Gaza is what happened under the American regime in Germany since 1945 and until Germany, I think it was 52 or 50, 1950, they got some kind of independence just after the denazification of Germany. Yeah. The Nazi regime was completely destroyed, and not only the military power, but all aspects of life. To me, that is a full victory. I don't know if we can achieve it, but at least we have to try to do all what we can to come close as we can to such kind of victory, and not only for the sake of us, for the sake of the free world and the sake of the Arab communities, because you have to remember, Amitai, we live here in the Middle East. The fight, Israel has its own fights, but here in the Middle East, you have conflict between the extreme regimes, which are all supported by Iran. Okay, it's extreme terrorism. Actually, it's not only terror organizations; it's terror states in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Yemen. If those evil power will win, if one of them will win, what would it tell to the Muslim brothers in Jordan, to the Muslim brothers in Egypt, in Algeria, in Morocco, all over the Middle East, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan? You know, I'll tell you another story, because I had this opportunity to visit so many countries. So I was in the last summer, I was visiting Uzbekistan, a very nice country, trying to develop, trying to shift from a very strong dictatorship to a more open regime. Now, it's a Muslim country. I believe 95% are Muslim. Now, the Muslim regime in Uzbekistan understands that if they want the country to succeed, so they can let some kind of religious practices, Muslim religious practices, but they cannot let any extreme power to rise in Uzbekistan. And they fight them strongly in Uzbekistan. Now again, let's say Hamas wins. Let's say Iran wins. What would be the message in Uzbekistan? Okay? What would be the message in Indonesia? So again, for the sake of the free world, Israel must win. Again, for us, I'm not hiding that. First of all, for the survival and the success of the Jewish people. But it's not only our war, not at all, not at all. And I want to tell you even more, at least in my tiny eyes. The rallies, the hate rallies you see all over Europe and America are just the first sign before, I don't know what's gonna happen. I can give you a scenario, but what we see here is an explosion of evil forces, which unfortunately are now all around our free world. And I hope, I saw that Rishi Sunak in the UK was beginning to take few steps again. What's going on there? It's just the beginning, and it's not enough. There is an internal risk to the free world from inside. And don't get me wrong, it's not against the Muslims. Don't get me wrong. It's against the extreme Islam, against the terror Islam. Okay? It's not against Muslim. I want to emphasize that. But we have to understand the risk is, the danger is from inside. And for the sake of the free world, because, and I want to tell you, I told you I'm 50 years old. And I was raised up in a sense that freedom is obvious, that the Jewish state is obvious, that the good will win, because that's what happened in 1945. So you know what? It's not obvious. It's not obvious. The bad guys might win. Okay? We have to open our eyes and not live in illusions. The bad guys can win. And I'll tell you even more. Do you know why did the free world, why did the free world win in the Second World War? It's not because of America and the UK. It's because of the Russians, of Stalin. If Stalin wouldn't help the Western allies, probably Hitler would take the entire Europe, including the UK, for decades. Who knows? Okay, so the evils might win. We have to be very, very aware to that. So going back to your questions about what to tell to people. I mean, I don't know if, you and I are talking here. I don't know. It's very hard. I mean, we are very, very small people. And how can we convince millions who disagree with us? It's a fair question. I don't know. But at least between you and me, let's understand what do we face, and the hopes that people will open their eyes, because the risks here are huge. And by the way, we had a miracle on October 7. I don't know if you know that. We had a miracle. And the miracle was that Hezbollah and the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Israel and Iran, all of them didn't join the war. Sinwar's plan was that once he is beginning, everyone will join him. And I don't want to imagine where were we now if that happened. And it's a miracle that happened in that holiday. Okay? And by the way, now we are before the Ramadan. What he's trying to do now in the coming weeks of the Ramadan is to trying to get now what he didn't have then. He wants an explosion during the Ramadan. He wants no deal. That's the reason he's not cooperating with the talks in Cairo, because he wants an explosion in Temple Mount in Al-Aqsa during the Ramadan. He wants that Hezbollah that didn't join him then will do it now. So we have to be aware to the risks. We have to know that our victory is not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed. So if that would convince one or two people who are listening or seeing us, that's enough for me. But I know the battle is very hard. I know that.
Yeah, and I think that to your point of it's enough to see what the Abraham Accords and the Saudis and the UAE, who totally de-radicalized its educational system and is doing a phenomenal job in becoming a beacon.
Saudis are in the middle of the way, I would say. But but the Emirates are a fantastic example. I was there and I saw it in my own eyes. Correct.
Yeah, but the Saudis are in the middle. But they could have easily disengaged and said we're done, but they're not.
Correct.
They're not.
Correct.
And I think that, and to me, that's a positive sign that they're more than halfway, because it's easier to disengage than to hold on. And so,
correct.
I think that there are people who understand that. And I mean, we are coming up at the end of our time, and I want to be mindful of it. And I can have these conversations forever.
And I didn't answer, I think, 2 questions you had.
Well, you didn't answer the ultra orthodox. We'll do a follow-up. It's fine.
By the way, there is no solution to that problem.
Yeah, I mean,
with the Haredim.
Yeah, certainly not in the way that it's being proposed. It's not going to be a mandated element. It has to be self-voluntary and self-selecting. And I don't know how that happens without a whole theological conversation about the role of Israel in Jewish history but that's another podcast, another whole hour and a half. But I do want to end. I think that this is an incredible. It's an incredibly important point that you're making, that the victory isn't guaranteed, and we can't lose sight of. It's it feels like a localized conflict, but it's not one of another Gaza war. I was in 2009 and cast lead in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not another one of those. This is a much bigger thing with much broader implications, and to keep people aware of the different elements that come into play in this, because it's not just Israelis and Palestinians, bickering or fighting over again. It's not at all part of that. It's a much bigger thing, and trying to figure out how do we work towards a reality or a world where that is no longer the case is a big question I think that we're facing, in terms of this is this doesn't you said that you're concerned that this might evolve into something much bigger in the region, and how do we stay away from that? And I think those are big questions to leave us with in this podcast. But thank you, Ariel, for joining us. I know we left a lot of questions on the table, but still I'm appreciative of your time, and I look forward to continuing our conversation.
Toda rabba. Thank you for having me. And again, we are tiny people with a lot of history, and we have to work very strong to have a very good bright future. We can do it, but we have to make big efforts to happen.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Toda rabba.